Hi, I'm Cameron McKenzie at CameronMCNZ on Twitter, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about exception handling and show you how to do it with Struts. I got Struts 2.5 installed here actually, and do it with annotations. Everybody else shows you how to do it in those config files. I'm going to show you how to do it in your Java code. So here's my registration form so far. If you've been following through, you know that I've got to trigger the display properties in order for these fields to come up properly, but everything seems to be working fairly well. The only problem that I have is there's no exception handling in here. So, I do have the ability to do some validation, as you can see, if somebody doesn't fill things in. But if an exception gets thrown, I'm still going to run into some problems. So I wanted to demonstrate just how I can add some exception handling into this application. Now, one of the things you should do is right off the bat, you should have some sort of a page for people to go to if there is an error. So we know what to do if we need to get more input. Send them to the register.jsp. If things work out, we send them to thank you. But what should we do if there's an error? Well, what we'll do is we'll add a new condition that says if there's an error, we'll send them to the error JSP. Now, I haven't created that yet. I'll create that in just a moment because there's some cool exception handling tricks that we can put in there. But that's really your first step into handling errors. Now, the other thing you might want to do is actually just do some exception mapping. So say, hey, if the null pointer exception happens, send somebody to this error page here. And you could potentially have different pages and different results mapping to different errors if you want. But that's just a basic one. If any of these methods here trigger this null pointer exception, at least anything that's dealing with the register action, triggers a null pointer exception, it'll go to the error page. Now, the other thing you can do is set error handling right at the action level. And I'd like to actually create a method that's just going to do nothing but trigger an exception. So I'm going to add this method called bad call in here. It throws an exception. And as you can see, I just do if true, throw new exception. So this just gets it to compile. If I didn't do the if condition here, I'd end up with an unreachable code exception. Instead, I just get a little, hey, dead code exception, which is just a warning, so it'll still compile. But this method will always throw this new exception, obviously. And so what you can do is, well, it doesn't have an action associated with it, so I want to associate an action with it. But I also want to put in an exception mapping here as well. So what I'll do is I'll add this. I'll do a skip validation for this so that it doesn't go through the validate method, which I have down here. And then I'll add the action. The action's name is just bad call. But specifically for this bad call method, if the java.lang exception happens, I want the error condition to be triggered. So we say for this action, we're going to add an exception mapping. Specifically, if the java.lang exception happens, we'll send somebody to the error page. And so this is a way that you can handle exceptions and specific exceptions right down to an individual action level. Now, the thing that we do need is we do need this error page. We've said that everything's going to go to an error JSP page. There's a couple of neat things you can do with the error JSP. I'm going to create that file right now. Click finish. Because it's a JSP, I don't want it under WebINF. I want it under Web Apps. Web Apps, so there it is. Close that and open it up again. Because it's a JSP, I want to make sure that I have all of the kind of required fields in here. So I'll open that up, put in the taglib, the page directive. I copied some of the basic HTML elements from the register page, just kind of cheated there a little bit. But you've got a couple of cool features that you can add to this page that will allow you to print out exceptions. I can print out the actual exception name. And I can maybe even print out the actual exception stack trace. Actually, I don't want that inside of a H4 tag. Maybe just a paragraph tag will make that a little bit more readable. The other thing you can do, this will actually print it out on the page. You might want to just have a message that says, sorry, there was an error. Try again later. I mean, you could do something like that. Put that in a p tag. But the other thing you can do is maybe instead of polluting the page, you could just perhaps just write the name of the exception to JavaScript. So this here, just putting this tag, the name of the exception, in a console.log procedure, that'll actually just have the log printed out to the console rather than displaying all of this on the page. You probably don't want to do that to your end user, but we'll leave it like that for this particular example. Now, I guess the other thing I need to do is just trigger this action. So I've got a new action called bad call. I'm going to have to trigger that. So I'll go back to my register page. You can see when I run the register page, just starting the server there. And click on the French properties. You can see the page looks like this. I'm going to add a link down here which says, trigger an exception, I guess. So I'll go into that register.jsp, move to the bottom here, and then right under there, I'm going to add a little bit of URL mapping. So I'll create a URL. It'll call the bad call action. That is the bad call action right there. Call the link bad link. That's just kind of makes that href here reference this struts URL that was created, and then the text will be trigger an exception. So this should trigger an exception in the register actions bad call method, but rather than getting a stack trace, we should get some nice output on this error page. So let's give that a try. I'm going to say run as or run on server. I'm going to take a look at that page. And I'm actually going to bring that up here in my browser. So let's see, bring that in the browser, go back to Struts, see if I can see Struts in the background there. And I'm going to click this trigger an exception. And when it does, you notice that I've got the page that displays the exception, exception name. There's the stack trace, as it's called the register bad call method, and an exception was triggered. If I scroll right down here, you can see where it says, sorry, there was an error. But the cool thing is if I do the inspect now on the page and actually look at the console, you can actually see the console is printed out java.lang exception. So that's the result of saying, hey, console, can you actually print this out? So where did I do that that was on the error page. There it is. Yeah, console, printing the exception out to the console. But yeah, you get to see right there exactly how that works. There we go. We got the register page. Let's display that nicely. Now we trigger an exception, and then finally we get that exception page coming up. And yeah, probably you don't want that stack trace on the page, but it gives you an idea of how to do it. And so there you go. That's how you can incorporate a little bit of exception handling into your action classes. Make sure you add that error mapping, add some exception mappings. You can even do that at the top level, and then you can even do that for individual actions as well. And there you go. That's how easy it is to add a little bit of exception handling in your Struts code. If you enjoyed that tutorial, head over to theserverside.com. I'm the editor-in-chief over there. We got lots of great tutorials on Struts and Spring and Hibernate and anything to do with enterprise software development, really. If you're interested in my personal antics, you can follow me on Twitter at CameronMCNZ and subscribe on YouTube.